It took no stone, no arrow, no single word to strike terror into the enemy's heart. Because the Vikings began winning battles in the enemy's mind, and this was called the Shield Wall. The silent shores of Lindisfarne Monastery, on that ominous June morning of 7093 AD, witnessed a sight never before seen in history. When hundreds of Viking ships appeared on the horizon, the monks on shore first thought merchant vessels were arriving, until the dragon heads on those ships' prows gleamed in the sunlight, and the metallic clash of warriors stepping ashore echoed in the wind. But the real terror began not when the first sword was drawn, but when those warriors lined up on the beach, hundreds of shields gleaming like a single wall in the sunlight, while the silhouettes behind them seemed like spirits risen from the underworld. This sight had ended the battle in the minds of Lindisfarne's defenders before it had even begun. The shield wall, or Skjaldborg in Old Norse, was not merely a military tactic. This was a war art that targeted the deepest fears of human psychology, perfected over centuries. Each shield, alone, was just a protective tool made of wood and leather, but when brought together, they became an impregnable fortress, an invincible force, and most importantly, a psychological weapon that shattered the enemy's mind. This formation reflected the deepest philosophy of Viking war culture, not individual courage, but collective power. The strength of a single warrior was limited, but when they came together, they became a force that even the gods feared. Each shield protected not only the person carrying it, but also the brother beside him. This mutual dependence carried the spirit of solidarity at the foundation of Viking society to the battlefield. The psychological effect of the shield wall was far more than its visual superiority. This formation targeted the enemy's most basic combat instincts. The human brain had developed a fight-or-flight reflex in the face of threat. But facing the shield wall, both options became useless. Escape was impossible because the Viking warriors had cut off every route, and fighting was illogical because that wall appeared impregnable. Archaeological findings show that Viking shields were designed not only for combat, but also for psychological effect. The symbols, colors, and metal ornaments on them were not random. Every detail was calculated to create a specific effect in the enemy's mind. The combination of red and black evoked blood and death, while dragon and wolf motifs represented supernatural forces. Modern archaeology has found very striking traces in excavations at settlements that suffered Viking attacks on the coasts of England, Ireland, and France. Human remains at these sites mostly show they did not die fighting, but were killed while trying to flee. This is archaeological proof of how powerful the fear effect of the shield wall was. Expressions in Viking sagas also confirm this psychological superiority. When the enemy saw the shield wall, it was as if their soul had left their body, writes an Old Norse text, revealing that this formation was not just a physical but a spiritual weapon. The design of the shield wall was not only practical but also symbolic. The circular shields represented cyclical time and eternity. For the enemy, this made them feel they were facing an immortal and invincible force. The colorful patterns on the shields were planned to be visible even in darkness, providing psychological advantage in night attacks. Another dimension of this formation was the pre-battle rituals. Viking warriors would perform ritualistic preparations as a group before forming the shield wall. These rituals not only prepared the warriors but also created sounds and images that would affect enemy morale. Distant drum sounds, metal clashing, and collective chants would break the enemy's nerves before the battle had even begun. The effectiveness of the Viking shield wall was seen not only in Europe but also in the Far East. Viking warriors serving the Byzantine Empire as the Varangian Guard had successfully used this formation in Anatolia and the Mediterranean. Byzantine historians described the effect of the Viking shield wall on enemies as like magic. The power of the shield wall lay not only in its visual effect, but in the depth of the ritual that created it. Viking warriors would train for years to form this formation. Every movement, every breath, every step was part of a predetermined choreography. Pre-battle preparation was like a sacred ceremony. Warriors would wake at dawn and first pray to the gods. They would pray to Odin for courage, to Thor for strength, to Tyr for justice. Then they would examine their shields, checking every scratch and damage, because a weak link in the shield wall could endanger the entire formation. In this preparation process, Each warrior would polish his shield with special oils and shine the metal fittings. The purpose was not only functionality, but the visual effect to be created on the enemy. Hundreds of shields, gleaming in the sunlight, could dazzle the enemy's eyes and temporarily blind them. The arrangement of shields also required special art. The most experienced warriors would stand in the front row, the young and inexperienced in the back. But this was not just a matter of experience. The psychological effect of the shield wall was created by each warrior knowing exactly his place and playing his role perfectly. Height arrangement was also strategic. The tallest and strongest warriors were placed in the center, shorter ones at the edges. This arrangement made the formation appear larger and more threatening when viewed from outside. For the enemy, this created the feeling of facing a gigantic monster. The shields used in the shield wall were also specially designed, larger and heavier than standard combat shields. These shields provided better protection and created visual impact. The figures on them were not random either. Wolf heads, dragon motifs, runic symbols, all chosen to trigger the enemy's primal fears. Silence was one of the most important elements of this ritual. Viking warriors would not speak a word while forming the shield wall. This silence was even more frightening for the enemy, because it created an unnatural, almost spiritual atmosphere. It appeared as if not hundreds of warriors but a single entity was moving. During this period of silence, warriors would communicate with hand signals. The meaning of each signal was predetermined and automated through years of training. This system allowed the formation to make changes without vocal commands, surprising the enemy. The rhythmic clashing of shields was also calculated. Warriors would strike their shields against each other in a specific rhythm, thus both raising their own morale and intimidating the enemy. This sound was a more effective psychological weapon than war drums, because it was close and real. Each clash made the enemy feel the power of that formation in their hearts. These rhythmic clashes could sometimes disrupt the enemy's attack timing, because the enemy would begin to mistake these sounds for signals and wait in constant alarm. This situation would exhaust their energy and scatter their concentration. Eyes were perhaps the most terrifying element of the shield wall. Hundreds of pairs of eyes would gaze steadily at the enemy from over the shields, watching them without blinking. This gaze was not individual, but collective. It created an effect as if they were looking with the eyes of a single massive creature. Viking warriors would train specifically for this steady gaze, not blinking, not changing facial expressions, recording every movement of the enemy. These were learnable skills. The most skilled could sometimes wait for hours without blinking. Even breathing was synchronized. Warriors would breathe in the same rhythm, making the formation appear like an organic living entity. For enemies, this reduced the feeling that they were fighting against a human army and made them think they were facing a supernatural force. This synchronized breathing also helped warriors calm themselves. Deep breathing, done as a group, reduced stress and increased focus. This technique was a method also used by today's athletes. When the formation was established, the leader would give a special signal. This signal was usually 3 strikes on his shield. At this moment, the entire formation's energy would change, and they would move into combat-ready position. For the enemy, this change reinforced the feeling that the formation was a living entity. The real power of the shield wall was in the psychological realm, not the physical. This formation was designed to create systematic collapse in the enemy's mind. Every minute, every second, eroded the enemy's morale a little more, destroying their will to fight. The first effect was a feeling of helplessness. Facing the shield wall, enemies could not find a suitable point for attack. The formation was so tight that there was not even the smallest gap to insert a sword or spear. This situation paralyzed the attacking side's strategic thinking capacity. The time factor was the most important element, increasing psychological pressure. The shield wall could remain in the same position for hours, waiting for the enemy's nerves to stretch. During this time, while Viking warriors waited disciplined, the opposing side would enter a search for solutions in panic and anxiety. This waiting process was the hardest part for the enemy, because the human brain struggles to cope with uncertainty. Not knowing when the attack would come, where it would come from, how it would come, caused constant stress. Viking warriors knew this psychology well and used impatience to their advantage. Uncertainty was fear's greatest nourishment. The enemy could not know what was happening behind the shield wall, what the warriors were planning, when they would attack. This unknowingness caused the human mind to imagine the darkest scenarios. Human imagination can produce scenarios far more terrifying than reality. Viking warriors knew this, and would let the enemy fight with their own fears. While waiting behind the shield wall, they would actually realize that the enemy's mind was fighting for them. The flexibility of the shield wall also surprised the enemy. The formation could quickly change shape when needed, transitioning to semicircle, triangle, or V formations. This adaptation ability prevented the enemy from developing any strategy, forcing them to constantly prepare for new threats. This variability also prevented the enemy's learning process. In normal battles, sides would observe each other's tactics and develop counter strategies. But because the shield wall could constantly take different forms, the enemy could never develop a definitive counter strategy. The use of sound was also a critical part of psychological warfare. Sometimes they would remain completely silent, sometimes they would all shout war cries together. This variability caused the enemy not to know what to expect, creating a constant need to be alert. War cries were not random either. Viking warriors knew which sounds would most break enemy morale. Wolf howls, dragon breath sounds, runic spells, all were chosen to activate the enemy's primal fears. The power of mythological symbols was also unforgettable. Odin's ravens, Fenrir wolf, or Mjolnir motifs on shields created the feeling in the enemy's mind that they were fighting divine forces. The power of this belief would block rational thinking and activate primal fears. These symbols were not just visual, but also cultural weapons. Most European peoples knew Viking mythology to some extent and were aware of the meanings of these symbols. An enemy seeing Odin's ravens would feel that the god of death was watching them. Another psychological effect of the shield wall was creating the illusion of numerical superiority in the enemy. The formation appeared so compact and effective that the enemy could not estimate the real number of Vikings. Most of the time they thought they were facing more warriors than there actually were. This illusion also disrupted the enemy's morale calculation. If they really thought there were more numbers, they would find fighting even more meaningless and tend to give up. In night battles, the psychological effect of the shield wall increased even more. In darkness, they could not see the exact dimensions of the formation, only metallic glints and shadows. This was the most terrifying scenario for the enemy, because they could not fully understand what they were facing. In moonlight or torchlight, the shield wall would appear almost supernatural. Shadow and light play would make the formation appear much larger than its actual size, and deceive the enemy's eyes. The deepest secret of the shield wall was the melting of individual ego into collective consciousness. This formation was not just a military tactic, but a spiritual experience reflecting the most fundamental values of Viking culture. Each warrior would set aside his own identity in the shield wall and become an organic part of the group. This transformation would begin with pre-battle rituals and be completed when the formation was established. There were no longer hundreds of individuals, but a single entity. This collective consciousness formation was also a reflection of Viking social structure. For them, the individual could not be thought of separately from society. The shield wall was the perfect example of carrying this philosophy to the battlefield. Each warrior was conscious that he was protecting not only himself, but also the one beside him, behind him, even his entire clan. This spiritual unification was very similar to what is known in modern psychology as flow state. Warriors would shut down their individual thoughts and focus on the group's collective consciousness. In this state, individual fear, anxiety, even pain would not be felt. This collective consciousness also erased individual fears. A warrior who feared death alone would experience a feeling of immortality when part of the group, because when the group spirit transcended the individual death became insignificant. In Viking belief, warriors who died in battle would go to Valhalla, that warriors who died while fighting in the shield wall would pass to the other world, not just individually but with the spirit of the group. This belief completely eliminated the fear of death. The synchronization in the shield wall was at mental as well as physical level. Warriors could feel each other's thoughts, fears, hopes. This empathy multiplied the power of the formation, because everyone would sense the needs of others in advance and act accordingly. This mental connection was the result of training together for years. The same group of warriors, having formed shield walls together in dozens of battles, had become able to understand even each other's smallest movements. Leadership was very special in this system. In the shield wall, the commander would lead not with orders but with energy. His determination, courage, passion would spread in waves throughout the formation. If the leader was strong and determined, the entire wall would reflect that power. This energy transfer was very similar to team spirit in modern sports. One player's motivation could affect the entire team. In the shield wall too, a strong leader's energy could instantly spread to hundreds of warriors. This collective spirit was also very terrifying for the enemy, because they would feel they were fighting not against individuals, but against a single massive entity. In normal battles, the enemy could find weak links among warriors and target them, but there was no weak link in the shield wall because everyone supported everyone. This mutual support system worked not only at physical but also emotional level. If one warrior was afraid, the one beside him would calm him. If someone got tired, another would share his burden. This system guaranteed that the formation remained constantly strong. Even death had different meanings in this system. If a warrior was wounded or killed, the brother next to him would immediately take his shield and fill the gap. This continuity made the formation appear unbreakable and further demoralized the enemy. This post-death takeover system was pre-planned and trained. Each warrior knew which position he would take in what situations and would act automatically when necessary. Warriors in the shield wall did not pursue individual heroism. For them, real heroism was contributing to the group's success. This mentality also reflected the social structure of Viking culture, not individual ego, but collective victory. This social consciousness would continue even after the battle ended. Warriors who fought together in the shield wall would feel a special bond until the end of their lives. They had become not just battle companions, but spiritual brothers. Breathing patterns in the shield wall were also coordinated. Warriors would breathe in the same rhythm, making the formation appear like an organic living entity. For enemies, this reduced the feeling that they were fighting against a human army and made them think they were facing a supernatural force. This synchronized breathing also helped warriors calm themselves. Deep breathing, done as a group, reduced stress and increased focus. This technique was a method also used by today's athletes. When the formation was established, even all warriors' heartbeats would begin to synchronize. This was the natural result of intense training and spiritual commitment. For the enemy, this created the feeling that the formation was truly a single entity. Victory was often won without a single sword blow being struck. Enemies crushed under the psychological pressure of the shield wall would retreat without daring to fight or surrender. This was the most perfect success of Viking strategy. Victory without bloodshed. At Lindisfarne that day, the monks and defenders had actually shown no resistance at all. Faced with the terrifying sight of the shield wall, they had dropped their weapons and tried to flee. The Vikings had captured the monastery without any losses, achieving one of their most effective psychological victories in history. Such silent victories showed how sophisticated Viking strategy was. For them, fighting was not the last resort, but the first resort, but the real skill was winning without fighting. The shield wall was the perfect example of this skill. This psychological superiority also formed the foundation of Viking expansion. When they arrived in new lands, the first thing they did was form a shield wall. This sight would cause local populations to surrender without resistance, preventing bloodshed. But the legacy of the shield wall was not limited to military successes. This formation also reflected the value system of Viking society: unity, solidarity, discipline, patience. These values were carried from the battlefield to daily life, ensuring the stability of Viking society. Even in the modern world, the principles of the shield wall maintain their validity. From sports teams to the business world, from military units to social movements, these principles can be seen everywhere. Collective power transcends individual talents. Most importantly, the shield wall teaches us the power of time and patience. In today's world dominated by pressure for quick results, the discipline of Viking warriors being able to wait for hours, contains a deep lesson. This formation also clarifies the role of human psychology in war and competition. Although physical strength and technical skill are important, mental superiority can surpass them. The shield wall was proof of this reality from 1,000 years ago. The historical importance of the Viking shield wall was not limited to the military field. This formation had played a critical role in battles that shaped Europe's political map. The Norman victory at the Battle of Hastings was made possible by Viking descendants using shield wall techniques. Even in the last great Viking battle at Stamford Bridge, Harald Hardrada's army's shield wall had stopped English forces for hours. Although this formation was defeated that day, it had inflicted heavy casualties on the enemy. Archaeological traces of the shield wall continue to be found throughout Europe. Shield fragments found on battlefields all show the same order: compact, organized, disciplined. These findings prove how widespread and effective the formation was. Modern military historians accept the shield wall as the first example of psychological warfare. This formation had shown that a systematic approach targeting enemy morale could be more effective than pure force. Human psychology research also explains why the shield wall was so effective. Coordinated movement in groups creates a predator-pack signal for the primitive brain. This signal activates escape instincts. The visual effect of the shield wall can also be seen in modern advertising and marketing techniques. The visual language used by brands giving messages of unity, strength, reliability reminds us of the principles of the shield wall. In the sports world, the concepts of team chemistry and collective mindset displayed by the most successful teams completely overlap with the spiritual dimensions of the Viking shield wall. Transforming individual talents into collective power is still the most effective success formula. Modern conflict resolution techniques also use lessons learned from the shield wall. Displaying strong unity is accepted as the most effective way to convince the opposing side without entering physical struggle. The educational value of the shield wall cannot be ignored either. This formation taught all values of discipline, patience, teamwork, empathy, leadership together. Modern education systems are beginning to rediscover such holistic approaches. From a cultural perspective, the shield wall was the symbolic expression of Viking identity. It was the expression of a social character that valued collective success rather than individual heroism, harmonized discipline with freedom, combined power with wisdom. This formation also showed itself in Viking art. Stone carvings, metalwork, textile patterns. The symmetric and orderly aesthetics of the shield wall could be seen in all war art, was intertwined with daily life art. Its effect on language was also striking. The word Skjaldborg began to be used over time, not only in military, but also in metaphorical meanings. It took place in Scandinavian languages, meaning strong unity, impregnable defense, collective determination. Even in the social policies of modern Scandinavian countries, it's possible to see the philosophy of the shield wall. Social safety nets, education systems, health services, all have the understanding of collective protection against individual difficulties. The technological dimension of the shield wall was also surprising. Shields produced using metallurgy, woodworking, textile techniques that could be considered very advanced for that period perfectly combined form and function. This technological skill required not only material science but also engineering understanding. The weight distribution of shields, grip points, aerodynamic properties, all were calculated and optimized. The environmental adaptation of the shield wall was also important. It could be adapted in different geographies, different climate conditions, against different enemy types. This flexibility was the secret of the formation's universal success. Nutrition and physical conditioning were also factors affecting the formation's effectiveness. Viking warriors would apply special diet and training programs for the shield wall. Endurance, strength, coordination, all were systematically developed. Mental conditioning was at least as important as physical conditioning. Meditation techniques, breathing exercises, visualization work, basic elements of modern sports were also present in Viking training. The ethical dimension of the shield wall is also worth discussing. Because this formation aimed to neutralize the enemy without killing them, it could be considered humane by the standards of that period. Bloodshed was the last resort. This ethical approach also reflected Viking society's view of war. For them, war was a necessary but unwanted situation. The real aim was to prevent conflict by showing their strength. Modern conflict theories define this approach of the shield wall as deterrence theory, the strategy of eliminating the need to use force by making a show of force. There is archaeological evidence that the shield wall was also used by female warriors. Shield maidens used the same formation techniques, fighting shoulder to shoulder with their male brothers. This gender equality was one of the progressive aspects of Viking society. Since what mattered in the shield wall was not individual strength but collective harmony, female warriors could be as effective as men. Age groups also had special roles in the formation. Old and experienced warriors took on strategy and leadership, young and strong ones, physical duties. Children also support services. Everyone's contribution was valuable. This intergenerational cooperation was also the source of Viking society's sustainability. Knowledge and experience transfer was very effectively realized even without formal education systems. The ritualistic dimension of the shield wall showed that war was not just a physical but a spiritual experience. Pre- and post-battle ceremonies were aimed at protecting warriors' psychological health. This ritualistic approach can also be considered a precursor to modern trauma treatment. Systematic methods had been developed to process, normalize, and contextualize the war experience socially. The connection of the shield wall with music and dance was also striking. Formation movements resembled the rhythm of tribal dances. This similarity showed that it used collective movement patterns stored in cultural memory. This musical dimension also facilitated the coordination of the formation. Rhythm and melody were natural tools that enabled hundreds of people to move in synchronization. The effect of the shield wall on language teaching was also interesting. Warriors from different tribes would develop a common command language while forming the formation. This contributed to the standardization of Scandinavian languages. The shield wall also had a role in trade and diplomacy. It would be used to make shows of force in trade negotiations, to send diplomatic messages. War formation could also be a peace tool. The architectural effect of the shield wall was also unforgettable. Viking architectural understanding had been influenced by the order and symmetry principles of this formation. The arrangement of longhouses, wall weaving techniques, followed similar logic. This architectural understanding also forms the foundation of modern Scandinavian design. The values of minimalism, functionality, harmony come from the aesthetic principles of the shield wall. Finally, perhaps the deepest teaching of the shield wall was this: real power comes from being together. Individual skills are important, but collective harmony transcends them. This lesson maintains its validity even 1,000 years later. Old Norse sagas tell, the greatest warrior is one who defeats his enemy in his own mind. The shield wall was the eternal proof of these words from the Stone Age. And this proof was valid, not only on battlefields, but in all areas of life. Because life is also a kind of war, and the best warriors are those who win without fighting. Take your place around the fire, because every stone of this land holds a saga, every breath contains a legend.